So what if you could charge the registered owner of a vehicle with an offense under the Trespass to Property Act? And no, it's not a figment of your imagination. You do most certainly have the ability under the T.P.A., under a lesser known section of the T.P.A. to do this. So stick around, I think you'll find this very interesting. This is a quick lesson in law with me, Brian Lass. Roll the intro. Welcome once again, I am Brian Lass, and before we get into it, as always, I will invite you to click the subscribe button you see below to make sure you're first in line for notification for not only this, but all future videos in the world of court process and procedure, law enforcement, and really everything in between. And yes, much like I alluded at the beginning of this video, you absolutely do have the ability under the Trespass to Property Act, and by you, of course, I mean people who actually have an ability to enforce the respective statute, the T.P.A., but you most certainly do have the ability to deal with the three respective offenses under the T.P.A., namely that under Section 2, of course, engage in prohibited activity, enter premises when entry prohibited, and fail to leave when directed for that matter. But we do have an ability to enforce this as it relates to vehicular-related offenses, more specifically vehicular-related breaches, if you will, of the respective three offenses under the T.P.A. And in doing so, we do have an ability to basically turn this into a owner liability type scenario. And yes, I know that might seem a little bit surprising, because when people think about owner liability or charging the RO, as we call it, registered owner of a vehicle, we sort of relate this more to that of parking matters under Part 2 of the Provincial Offences Act. So this, may come as a little bit surprising or shocking, even for that matter, for a lot of people who didn't, otherwise know about a lesser known section a little further down in the depths of the T.P.A., namely that of Section 11 of the Trespass to Property Act, which you can see up on your screen. Now the section, arguably a little bit wordy, so very simply and concisely what this section says is that, should we have grounds, in regards to a vehicular-related offense, as it speaks to the offenses under Section 2 of the Trespass to Property Act, should we have an inability to deal with the driver of this vehicle at the time, we most certainly can turn this into a, an owner liability type scenario, i.e. we can charge the actual registered owner of this vehicle. And, with that being said, really the only recourse that the registered owner would have in being charged here is if he or she can prove that at the time of the offense, whoever was driving this vehicle actually had the vehicle without this owner's consent. And this speaking, of course, to the true spirit of the T.P.A., being that the offenses under the T.P.A. are that of reverse onus. So, with all that being said, really we talked about, the type of circumstances here being vehicular related, but, how exactly will we go about commencing a proceeding in this regard? So let's use, a plausible scenario. Let's say you're in the course of your duty, vehicle comes on your property, perhaps the vehicle blows through a sign. Let's say the sign is that of a left arrow with a universally recognized red circle with a line through it, of course, this indicating no left turn. This sign, again, definitively satisfying proper notice under the T.P.A., specifically Section 5 and of course Section 6, speaking to proper form signage. But nonetheless, this car, it blows through this no left turning sign. The car at the time, they don't want to stop whoever's driving this car. The driver doesn't want to deal with you. The car basically storms off the property. Of course, we're not going to engage in any sort of vehicle pursuit in this regards, but how do we, deal with the circumstance after the fact, so to speak? Well, obviously, the one thing, and really first and foremost thing you're going to want to do is record the particulars of this offending vehicle, namely that of course, the license plate, because it is with this license plate as to which we're going to figure out who the actual RO or registered owner of this vehicle is. In that, again, with this license plate, we're going to run our respective checks, or inevitably the respective checks will be run through the ministry. The RO information will come back indicative of the person's name, birth date, all the particulars we'll want to put on some kind of provincial process, whether it be under Part 1 or Part 3 for that matter of the Provincial Offences Act. But more specifically, of course, what will be included with this is, the last known address on file of this actual RO, which obviously where this comes into play is how we're going to serve this person and actually, commence this proceeding, so to speak. So with all this information, there's a couple of different ways, as I just alluded to, that you can commence a proceeding in regards to a vehicular related offense after the fact. of course, in the T.P.A. Now, under Part 1 of the Provincial Offences Act, this would be indicative, of course, whether it says, basically a ticket, so to speak, an offence notice, or a Part 1 summons for that matter. Obviously, we have 30 days from the date of the offence to commence this proceeding. Now, that being said, Part 1, however, of course, you have to err on the side of caution. In order to effect proper service under Part 1 of the Provincial Offences Act, it does have to be personal service, and needless to say, as some of you are already thinking about, this plausibly gets you into the realm of having to make this door knock at the RO's house, getting into a little bit of a, perhaps, or at least having, the possibility of there being some kind of, item of contention and trying to ID the actual RO of this vehicle. Whereas, of course, under Part 3 of the Provincial Offences Act, proceeding by way of information, here, fortunately, matters are a little bit easier as far as effecting proper service, being that, under Section 26 of the Provincial Offences Act, which talks about effecting proper service of a Part 3 summons, basically, if we're talking about an individual, you would just simply have to articulate that the summons was left with someone who appeared to be over 16 years of age and an inmate of the respective property, in this case, the last known address of the RO, an inmate just being a fancy way of saying this person looks like they're staying there, that they're living there. And for that matter, should, the vehicle belong to a corporation, by going to this place of business, going to this corporation's address, whatever address is on file, and leaving this summons with, either a secretary or a manager or someone who seems to be in some kind of authoritative position, if you will, at this place of business. Now, again, further, under Part 3, this is a scenario which we're dealing with the long-form summons process, or summons after the fact, charging someone after the fact. So, of course, things being a little bit reversed in that the first thing we're going to want to do is actually attend at intake court to meet with the JP to first swear the information. And under Section 24 of the Provincial Offences Act, the Justice of the Peace in this circumstance is not confirming a summons, but rather is considered to be issuing the summons, the Form 106, what we refer to as a long-form summons. So, with all that being said, still the one thing to remember here, and the one thing that we shouldn't overlook, is that, in regards to this whole idea of vehicular-related offenses and charging, the RO of the vehicle, we do have to, of course, ensure that proper notice was satisfied under the T.P.A, and I do want to enforce that. With all that being said, I certainly hope this has been somewhat insightful, been somewhat enlightening for you. As always, I appreciate all the views and all the likes. So until next time, I bid you a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is you're watching this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so very much. Take care.